From recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex, I'm your host, Steve Urban, and here is your Riderflex podcast episode of the day. Trevor Jones on the Riderflex podcast. What's up, Trevor?
What's up, man? How are you, Steve?
I'm hanging in there. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
I want to get into Lynx Global Intelligence and want to find out all about Lynx. But before we go down that path, why don't you tell the listeners a little something about Trevor? Give us some personal stuff, family, where you grew up, why you went to Tulane, even though you went to Cherry Creek High School in Colorado. I want to know all of it.
Yeah, sure. So Cherry Creek High School to Tulane in New Orleans, for anybody that knows those two places, it's a big transition, right?
Right.
So,
I saw that on your profile. I'm like, okay, there's a story there somewhere.
Yeah, man. No, New Orleans definitely opened my eyes a lot just to the kind of humanity and diversity in our country, right? So
right.
That certainly shaped me a little bit.
Right. Because Cherry Creek High School, I mean, that's a pretty sheltered environment, right? I mean, that's
yeah. It was bigger, actually. You know, Creek is a bigger school than Tulane. So if you look at the undergrad, so it's huge, right? I mean, so sheltered, anonymous, you know, very kind of, it got you in the mode to go to college for sure. But moving to New Orleans changed my life. And then I was actually learned to play in bands there and wound up being in the music business after the Great Recession for the next.
So this kid from Colorado goes to Tulane. He ends up getting in the music industry. Okay, well, let's go. Oh, let me go back though. Tell me about your family. Are you your mom and dad? Give me a little history there. Any siblings?
Yeah, great. So folks are from Texas. You know, I escaped in the womb is what I like to say, but you know, great family, you know, like awesome grandmas, especially in Austin and Kerrville. Still very close with them down there, but we're a Colorado family, right? I mean, I was born in Denver, grew up here. You know, running around the mountains as a Boy Scout when I was a kid and that kind of thing. And you know, my dad's a big influence. He actually, you know, he works with us as an advisor and kind of an admin person now, and was initial money in too. I mean, he was an oil and gas guy. He built accounting software for oil and gas. So really, you know, riding that probably emergent or nascent wave of business coming to Denver and Colorado from elsewhere in the United States in the 80s and 90s. So he's been a huge influence on us, and you know, mom is awesome. What can I say? Leah Jones is a saint.
So your dad was doing that for a living. He wasn't an entrepreneur though. Or was he?
You know, I mean, it was one of those situations where I think they had probably 100 employees by the end. But yeah, I mean, they grew organically. And,
they did. Oh, okay, all right.
So, you know, and so that influence is strong, right? To go out and get the deal versus just go get kind of investment cash and see what happens, right? So that influence is big, and it's helped out a lot and given us a lot of frame. And now I'm running into people that he knew that he used to work with that are kind of becoming either customers or partners, really? Particularly in oil and gas, because we serve natural resources as part of what we do, right? So
that's when were you the only kid?
No, I got a little brother. He just got his PhD from the School of Mines too. So
what? So one of the boys goes off to start his own business, and the other boy is a PhD from School of Mines. Damn, they got to be pretty proud.
Yeah, one's brave or stupid, and one just has a tremendous brain. That's part of it. So yeah, Eric Jones is his brain is literally popping out of his skull. So quantum physics was his thesis. Yeah, absolutely.
Quantum physics from School of Mines. Okay, yeah, he's a smart kid.
Yeah, that's going to be an investable kid one day for sure.
So how the hell did you? All right, so you graduate Cherry Creek. How did you decide on Tulane? Walk me through that.
Yeah, great question. You know, I, for all intents and purposes, thought Tulane had a beach. You know, I was a Colorado kid and had never been to New Orleans, and visited one time. And actually, an older brother of a friend at Creek had brought me kind of around to some of the, I guess, parties at the time and stuff, and it was. Became readily apparent that that's where I wanted to be.
Okay, now wait a minute. Let's pause right there. So that's what really happened. You went to New Orleans to a couple of parties, and you're like, I got to be here. This is
I guess we're getting down to the nuts and bolts. Yeah, that's basically exactly what happened. I mean, you know, I got great grades at Creek, and I got great grades in grad school at DU. But let's just say there was a little bit at Tulane there. It's hard to study during Mardi Gras, right? So yeah. It's good
Yeah,
stuff.
that's a party town. So it was a good time. Needless to say, going to Tulane was an awesome experience for you.
It was a trying experience too. You know, we had Hurricane Katrina during that time as well.
Ooh.
So kind of evacuating, seeing how, you know, the city was devastated, and then we had the civic resurgence. And I say we, like I still, you know, I'm there. I mean, it's near and dear to my heart, but so very challenging, but also triumphant watching the town come back. You know, what really happened is there was very few musicians like right after the storm because everybody had to leave, and so those of us that did come back, I was probably at a, you know, advantage just being a kind of a small fish in a small pond because of what had just gone down. I was able to play with some of the, you know, the kind of the greats, some of the funk, the masters of funk that kind of invented that kind
What
of music.
did you
And
play?
so,
Did you play in high school? Did you play in bands in high school?
you know, yeah, I definitely did, and it was kind of a hobby. But going to New Orleans kind of just, honestly, there's a lot of entrepreneurial kind of analog there because it puts you in a situation where it's do or die, right? I mean, you're either gonna, I guess, kind of execute or
Mm.
not, and so for whatever reason, just kind of being immersed in that environment and not really being technically trained, yeah, I was just able to.
Wow. What'd you play?
I played the guitar and sing, yeah,
Wow. And you sing too?
yeah,
So you're playing gigs down in Louisiana,
sure.
like after the hurricane.
Yeah, absolutely, man. When only part of the town was dark still. I mean, most of the town was dark. I mean, it was
Wow.
it was a very intense vibe, to put it like that, right? Just
Oh,
like
I bet.
just the
I bet.
the what had happened. I mean, it's the worst natural disaster in U.S. history, and also just the culture and, I guess, volume of art and culture that New Orleans brings to the United States. Just all of that mixed up, and also being like 19 years old and, you know, a Creek kid, so maybe I wasn't like super aware
That's
of the
so
world
cool.
yet. So just like what, you know, all of those things, all those factors combined, I think was pretty impactful, and yeah, definitely had a bit of an impact entrepreneurially because there was no guidebook, there was no, you know, it was, I could call mom and dad at home, and like we said, they're great, but other than that, it was, you know, far away place and in a post disaster recovery environment, so it was
So,
interesting.
all right. So that sounds like a very cool time. What'd you do after school?
Yeah, so I just it was graduated in 2008, and so that was, you know, kind of when the economy wasn't great, the last half.
Psychology major.
Psychology major, and yeah, I'm gonna have to take all this stuff off the internet. But yeah, so went on tour, you know. So I mean, that was it. We were making cash in hand, and so we played music for the next 7 to 8 years all around the country.
You that's what you made. That's what you did for a living. Play gigs,
That's what I did
travel.
in my 20s. That's how I paid the rent in my 20s, which is, looking back on it, I'm like, how did we some months, you know? But we rented or not rented, we bought a, you know, 1989 Ford Sprinter RV and
Cool.
toured around the country for 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
That 8 years is an experience you will never forget. I mean
yeah,
that
it's like a whole lifetime packed in the, you know, from what I can remember, which is like this, you know, the latter 2/3. You know, that's like a whole lifetime to pack
right.
into just a couple years. So,
We could
and then,
do
you know,
we could do a whole episode just you telling us stories from that,
yeah,
right?
we could do music. If there's some music business entrepreneurs out there, we can go down that rabbit hole all day long for
Well, real
sure.
quick before we get off that topic, who's the most famous person you know interacted with? I guess like you want to tell one quick story about a famous person?
Sure.
Anybody you want to share? Go for it.
I guess, you know, in an early expression of the entrepreneurial thing, we actually put on a show at Red Rocks, and it was
Oh,
called Mountainside Mardi Gras. And I had eight or nine bands from New Orleans come to Red Rocks and play like in August, early August.
that you set up? You
Yeah,
organized it?
yeah, I ran the whole thing. So we did it was wild, man. It's a good way. It's kind of like betting. It's a good way to either make or lose a lot of money in one shot. It's not like B2B SaaS where you can kind of, you know, iterate and make adjustments. It's all one shot. So anyway, you know, I happened to be able to play with the Dirty Dozen Brass Band that night and meet
Cool.
meet Dr. John, and just like, you know, some real legends, right?
Cool.
And they were excited to be in Colorado too. That's the other thing is, Red Rocks is such a draw that really is special for equally as special for them too. So it was a special night for sure. It was nice and got to play with some heavy hitters, but yeah, we'll have to grab a coffee or a beer and I'll tell you about some other.
Yeah. Because I got to know about the deeper stories. I got to know about all the drug and alcohol stories. I got to know the deep stuff. We'll go there. Sidebar.
Yeah, man. I don't know what you're talking about. We were totally sober the whole time. So I'll let you know the VH1 behind the music.
Yeah, right. So at some point, you're on this Sprinter bus going, okay, I got it. Yeah. What am I really going to do with my life? Walk us into the transition.
Yeah, that's a great, man, such a great question. So I was actually, believe it or not, I had loved international affairs always. I was always kind of like reading The Economist, like a big dork backstage when, everybody's doing all the stuff you're just talking about. And, so what happened is I wound up climbing up a volcano in Panama while I was traveling. So I went to Panama with a girlfriend at the time and we climbing up this thing. It's called Volcan Baru and it's on the border of Panama and Costa Rica. And you can see the Caribbean Sea, the Pacific Ocean, and Panama and Costa Rica from the summit all at once. And I don't have a lot of eureka moments in my life. It doesn't happen often. I'm kind of typically plotting through my own thought process in a pretty slow way. But for whatever reason on that volcano, I just kind of had this eureka moment that, the music business was just not going to be my full-time endeavor moving forward. And because it's tough, right? I mean, you're living in a Sprinter van, like we're talking about, what are we really talking about here? So, and trust me, it's awesome. And like I still play a lot of music. I'm still, I fly to New Orleans, pre-COVID quite a bit to do that thing. But for whatever reason, just this particular morning, it just kind of hit me. And so, the next logical step to follow international affairs and foreign policy, which had always kind of been my weird, secret, hidden passion, was to go back to school and kind of immerse myself via academia. And so DU has a fantastic foreign affairs school founded by Madeleine Albright's father after he escaped Czechoslovakia in the 40s, I believe. So I have to check my history a little bit on that, but essentially it's this great piece of international affairs, academia, and history right here in Denver. So I didn't have to go to DC or New York. And I love how much we're focusing on Colorado in this kind of interview because our scope is quite global, but it changed my going back to DU. It's called the Joseph Corbell School of International Studies. Going back there just completely 180'd my life, like changed everything. I mean, I went from, playing in bars late at night to just 2 or 3 years later, presenting my research to the, State Department and flying to DC and actually flying to Geneva, Switzerland and talking about things like humanitarian intervention. And
how are you funding? How are you funding all this?
That's a great question. I'm a lucky guy. I had, my family's got some resources where I'm able to go to school at this point. And, also, I'll also mention when I'm traveling, I'm pretty austere. So, staying in, which is always a contrast, especially early on in Lynx too, when we were kind of trying to save a lot of money, but traveling around to spread the word, trying to kind of stay at hostels, and then snack shower, and then you're putting on your suit to go to the meeting at the, UN or whatever happened to be at that point. And so that contrast was just really interesting thinking.
All right. I didn't mean to break your flow. You're traveling, you're doing the studies. Okay,
no,
cool.
No. Yeah, not at all. No, it's all part of the journey together, right? So, I mean, it changed my perspective, the people I was interacting with, the things I was thinking about, the problems I cared about in the world, right? So, once you get out of the United States, you enter, depending on where you are, into a situation where you might have maybe a bit more of a lack of security, or human rights or human dignity might not be quite as upheld, right? And I'm kind of putting a bit of a soft touch on that, but once you kind of, I guess, leave our borders or look abroad, there's some other problem sets that you can start to attack entrepreneurially. And that's, I think, also the interesting thing. And I'm not trying to skip ahead or ask your questions for you, but the international affairs world's kind of over here. I know my hand's cutting out on the
That's
visual
all right. You're good to go.
and the entrepreneurial world's kind of over here, but like connecting those two things is something that's not super apparent to people that are in academia, nor are the problems that are international super apparent to the entrepreneurs out there necessarily as
Good
well.
Point.
Domestic
good
problem,
point.
and not that we don't lack for domestic issues to go ahead and try.
But compared to third world countries, I mean, come on, it's not even. Yeah, seriously. Some of the problems we think we have here compared to other countries, like, come on, it's not even close.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's right, and it is okay to talk about that because we're all people in the world, right? So, it's cool to work on domestic stuff. It's cool to work on international issues, and increasingly they're overlapping too. So that's
So you're seeing this. So your point is you're starting to see this. You're starting to see opportunity. You're seeing like, okay, what can be done here? I see opportunity. Okay, go ahead. So now you're about to walk us into you formulating Lynx, I think. Go for it.
Yeah. So after school, I meet my former founder and business partner. He was a former foreign service officer and actually was a Secret Service agent for a little while as well. And so he was very plugged into DC and some of the, international points of business procurement and that kind of thing. And, as it turned out, his passion lay elsewhere. So we were consultants for a little while, did some great projects, but I really took over as CEO of Lynx about 2.5 years ago. And it was at that point we started producing technology. So we were a consulting firm first, doing things like, we were helping CEOs going from places like Chicago to places like Cairo, helping them with the security and political risk of that scenario and giving them kind of these static reports and PDFs and some advisory and consulting services that they were able to use. But the margin on that is it's so limited, right? I mean, you're carving out just hourly consulting stuff, and I don't know about your guys' model, so I want to hear about that too. But it's interesting kind of when you start producing tech, you're like, oh, I see how this could kind of replicate and scale. And so that kind of started the idea for what has now become Lynx today.
And give us the 3 to 5 minute elevator pitch for Lynx. Go for it as it stands today.
Yeah, sure. We're a B2B SaaS platform for natural resources and security. And essentially what the platform solves for is that analysts and also C-suiters are going to all these different websites all day long to get data from social media, news, internal databases and websites, and then whatever else they're dealing with. So we suck it all together in one place. We're a data aggregator, and so we use a lot of data visualization, geolocation, and then some dashboards to put all the data that either the security risk officer or that risk officer for a mining or company or oil and gas company needs to see in one spot. And that can take different forms. A lot of it is security based, so terrorism, crime, theft, protests, roadblocks. These are the issues our clients face abroad, and we can talk about the kind of particular countries and markets we operate in. And then on the other side of the equation, kind of more of the sustainability side, oftentimes it has to do with environmental and social data, which oftentimes, those grievances produce security situations. If you think about it, so if you think about a community that has grievances against a mining company for polluting water, that can turn into a security issue too. So we kind of, collapse all of that into one map and dashboard situation. So that chief risk officer, chief security officer can see what's going on. So we're a data aggregator. We work a lot with geo visualization, big data. We have some nascent machine learning functions as well. So some of the NLP work we're doing on social sentiment for miners and oil and gas is kind of built into the dashboard function as well. But yeah, we're basically solving for this issue that we really all experience all the time, which is that there's a million places to go get your information. and it's growing every day. The amount of data is growing every day, especially due to IoT sensors and the prevalence of things like GPS and even some new satellite partners, which we have here in Colorado that can monitor assets quite cheaply and efficiently. So we kind of made the decision strategically that rather than go out and create some sort of new data set for risk or security, there's a lot of firms out there that are kind of doing that already. We'd make more of a tool, more of an aggregation tool for that analyst to make
So
their
you pull information from a bunch of different places and put it on one platform for the security officer to see and monitor. Is that a layman's term explanation or no?
That's exactly it. I could have said it more succinctly, like you just. I could have said it better myself. And then also, where that's displayed is a map. So it's a very, very detailed, highly granular global map that can show millions of data points very, very rapidly for those same individuals.
Because right now, if I'm like the I don't know, head of security for Nike or whatever, I'm looking at a bunch of different things. I'm logging into a bunch of different places. I'm trying to gather all this information from a bunch of different resources.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, so you might learn about a piece of intelligence from, let's say, the New York Times or Washington Post. Maybe you have an Indonesian language newspaper that you'd like to extract some information from. Maybe the UN has put out some great information that's publicly available on that Indonesian market, or where some of the risks have happened around particular assets, or kind of along the lines of certain actors or attack types, casualties. These types of things. You can filter all that stuff, aggregate it all really quickly, and see it on the map. And everybody understands a map, right? Like it's a map is an ancient tool that we kind of intuit well cognitively.
So lynxglobalintelligence.com. Who's your target client? I mean, a certain size company, or what are you targeting?
Yeah, absolutely. So mid-size and major oil and gas and mining companies are our primary target right now. Those companies really experience the security and also the environmental and social risk in market. And it's really hard to move your mine. It's impossible. It's a fixed asset. And then, pipelines, things like ports, factories, these are the kinds of fixed assets that really experience these risks. And I'll also say those same sectors, but on the finance side, right? I mean, we have a push towards making sure that investments are, not only safe and secure for communities and workers, but also environmentally sound and are going to promote some sort of aspect of social good, right? You hear the BlackRocks of the world kind of endorsing this movement towards ESG, environmental, social, and governance data. And that's really important for us to kind of nail that aspect too, not only because we know it's coming down the pike in the market, but also because we know that it's going to be really useful as a tool to kind of mitigate some of those risks and security issues that stem from those environmental and social grievances.
What's the model? Is it per user? Is it the size of the company? Is it month to month? Walk me through the model a little bit.
Yeah, we actually do a per asset model right now. So it can be there can be hundreds of data sets that pertain to a particular asset. And again, a mine can be quite small, or it can be a few kilometers or miles long. It can be quite localized, or it can be kind of a huge thing. So we want to make that the, I guess, alterable unit in our pricing. And so we price on asset. We allow a lot, actually dozens of users within our first tier when we price, because you might be 2 or 3 guys in downtown Denver and you have an asset in Africa and you need to know what's going on, or you could be like one of our banner clients in Lima, Peru, and there's several hundred of you working in a security operations center. And so going user by user, one by one is not really, doesn't make a ton of sense. So our tranches or our tiers for our pricing tend to be quite wide on the user side, but it's the asset that kind of drives the pricing model. And then we do a bit of a data configuration period up front. We don't want to kind of ignore the custom needs of the client. We also don't want to be a custom development shop. So we kind of we call it configuration or a little bit of discovery. And then
Okay.
it's what you would expect from enterprise B2B SaaS model, for the rest of the year, which is a kind of a fixed price point. And then if they want some custom dev or some other modules, we can do like satellite data, some of the more advanced IoT stuff, and that'll cost a little bit more. But we really want to shoot for simplicity, I think, in that model. So we're
Okay.
not.
Okay. Do you have a lot of competition in this area, or do you have is your platform super secret patented technology that nobody else has, or is it, talk to me about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's it's so interesting, right? So we have a lot of competitors in the traditional risk and security sphere because those are
Okay.
industries that have existed for, in some cases, hundreds of years, right? I mean, think about the Lloyds of London or the control risks of the world, where they've really been around for a long time. Have a big, sizable chunk of the embedded market that probably isn't going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Where there is a lot of that said, I should also mention that those security problems are really big hair on fire issues. In other words, when there is terrorism around your asset, people are getting kidnapped, there's roadblocks, there's business discontinuity. Even though there's a lot of competition, there's also a lot of problems, and there's more problems over time, and the problems get more complex. So the demand side of that equation grows.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
that's important to remember.
Okay.
On the flip side of the business, on the sustainability and ESG side, you really have very few nascent or emergent competitors that are, because it's very tough. And I say it's interesting because when we say ESG, we're talking about environment and society. Well, if I come up to you, Steve, and say, let's talk about environment and society, are we talking about anything specific? Are we talking about
Right.
we're talking about vegetation? Are we talking about water? Are we talking about dust in
Yeah,
the air?
you're right.
Talking
Exactly.
about social grievance, which can, one situation which really may empower human rights, may have a different effect on the economy, right? So we have to balance all these different things. And so what we like to do is really try to break that down and be a little bit more granular, because we know if we can focus on just the water, just the vegetation, some of those particular specific granular pain points that industry is experiencing, then we're not just building an ESG tool. And so because there are so many little granular problems, and also because ESG is kind of new, and sustainability and impact investing has been around for a while, but the idea that we should be building this into our base risk framework and enterprise is very, very new. That allows for a lot of kind of frothiness and new ideas, and so that's kind of what I'm preaching when I talk to other technologists or even students. DU happens to have me back to teach once or twice a year, and so when I talk, I say, like, there are so many problems that we can attack on that sustainability side, if we can only just match the technology solution to whatever that problem happens to be. Yeah,
Okay.
not very many competitors.
Okay. Tell us about the company size. So, how many employees today?
Yeah, totally. So we have there's 5 of us total.
Okay.
We got 1 full-time, 1 FTE, and then 4 member managers, right? So we're actually an LLC at this point, and then probably switch over to a C corp, fairly soon as we do some of the upcoming activities I was telling you about.
How did you raise the cash for developers to build the software you needed for this thing? How did you get that done?
Yeah, sure. It's been a combination of just getting a lot of consensus and buy-in and sweat equity. So, I've certainly have spent much of the last 2 or 3 years kind of just trying to create that energy and momentum around what we're doing.
Translation for the listeners. Trevor called his friends and said, "Yo, listen, can you build this for me? And I'll give you, I can't pay you anything, but I'll give you a piece of the company." I mean, that's how that goes.
Exactly what happens. So sweat equity definitely plays into it. And, and I will say that, yeah, our CTO, Matt, and I, we start a lot of sentences with, "Yo, you're not wrong about that." So that's exactly.
I can hear the conversation. He's like, "Wait a minute. My buddy who played the band for 10 years, he's calling me saying he wants me to build a bunch of software, but he can't pay me anything, but he's going to give me he's going to give me some equity on something that's going to be worth some money someday." Yeah.
So what's really super quick anecdote. What's crazy about that is I was in Bogota, Colombia, with a vice minister of foreign affairs, and we're walking out of the steak restaurant. And I look over, and Matt is standing there, and I say, probably yo. We probably
Yeah,
say,
how'd you get? Did you even know he was going to be there?
we didn't know each other. We were strangers at this point.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which is even crazier, right? And so I go up to this guy, you know, you see people that look like an American when you're traveling, you go up and say hi.
Oh, gotcha.
Say, yo, I live in Denver. Yo, I build software. He's a musician too. You know, so we're I consider us friends too. And also he is just an absolute monster on the kind of dev side and just, cranks out some functionality. So that's like, you can't ask for that. That's lucky. You can't even necessarily hire yourself into that situation sometimes too.
So some sweat equity and then did you get some family angel money there? Some loans or investment or something for family? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And then after that, it's been organic and just trying to do paid pilots and get subscriptions and
no other outside cash. No other. You haven't done any
no institutional cash. No, and I guess to date, we're pretty proud. We built up a pretty significant network in Latin America and Europe, and it's been
nice.
It's been organic and friends and family at this point. So
are you cash flow positive? Are you making money and making profit at this point? Or are you still scaling?
Yeah, our margin is really great. So we are, even in COVID times, cash positive, which is nice.
Sweet.
And, yeah, thanks. But I will say I don't think COVID has increased exploratory budgets around the world for B2B products. I think we can all logically probably intuit that, but
I can just see you're talking to a CEO. You're like, listen, ESG. Let me tell you what that means, and I'm going to talk to you about why you need my service, even though you're cutting expenses right now. I'm going to tell you why you need to add one. Yeah, I bet the sales efforts this year have been interesting.
Yeah, we're B2B SaaS and international too. So I sell in Spanish a lot, and all of those elements together can tend to draw the sales cycle for sure. And I mean, that's difficult.
Do you speak Spanish?
I do. I was lucky enough to learn early enough. I kind of packed it in the brain, and then at this point, I'll be giving a presentation next week to 20 different mining companies in Sonora, Mexico. Actually.
Wow. Okay.
So we'll send that data out. We'll tweet that out. And
so you got this thing off and running. It's producing revenue. It's cash flow positive. You don't owe a big VC firm. You didn't let them buy in. You didn't give away control of the company. You don't have a bunch of loans.
That's right.
Good for you.
Thanks.
Good for you. You got this thing off and running. You've scaled it the smart way without having to take on a bunch of cash to, let somebody take control of your company or anything like that. I'm assuming you're still in control.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Firmly. And I think that, that's important, and it's tempting, right? To say,
right,
let's put the cart before the horse and build something that's awesome. I mean, look, that would probably shorten the sales cycle in the short term.
Yeah.
But we do know that there's this opportunity kind of on both sides of the coin we've been talking about all over the world. As soon as you get away from North America and Europe, you just see an incredible need for digital transformation tools, period. Like, I don't care what industry.
I couldn't agree more. We could do a whole podcast on the opportunities outside the United States. So many entrepreneurs that have never traveled, they've never been to other countries. They just have no idea. There's so many things we take for granted here. And there's so many opportunities in some of these smaller countries. I mean, I just talked to a guy that lived in Jamaica for a while, and he's like, look, man, I just was hoping I had fresh water, and I hope they had milk at the grocery store when I went down there.
Yeah.
He's like, we just take so many things for granted here. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, and it is a mindset, right? It's a mind frame of saying, can I apply that same rigor to Los Angeles as I'm applying to Lagos, Nigeria? Right? So, whatever your global example happens to be, because people all need a variety of, very basic things. So you can speak to that kind of B2C market around the world. And then you also have this wealth of, I shouldn't necessarily call it wealth because it's kind of a positive term, but you have a breadth of complex global issues, security, security, capital S, ESG, sustainability, supply chain. I mean, that's huge now.
What percentage of your revenue is outside the U.S. from all the clients you have? Do you have more outside?
100%.
100% of your revenue is outside the U.S. Wow, how about that? Wow, yeah, you got all kinds.
I think it's kind of a sneaky backdoor. You're kind of it's not lower hanging fruit because it's very tough to go get that revenue. You know,
Mhm.
the language and cultural and selling barriers that we're kind of talking about. But I do think if we prove ourselves in a Lima, Peru, and a Nigeria, and a London, you know, we can come back to some of the investors here at home and clients here at home and say,
Agreed. Agreed.
you know,
Agreed.
look at what we can do. And I think we can. I mean, we've gotten to yes in those markets, and that's nice.
Speaking of getting to yes in a market like that in a different country, what's the most unique cultural thing you've had to do where you're like, okay, listen, when we go here, they shake hands a certain way, you know, just whatever they do, like certain little culture thing where you're like, okay, I got to make sure I don't screw this up. Anything you want to
Yeah,
share?
sure. I mean, in terms of business cultural stuff, the Japanese business card is really interesting because you respect the business card in Japan as if it's essentially, you know, a part of the person that is presenting
Wow.
to you or that you're meeting with. So I don't
Wow.
shove it in my pocket. I don't like put it in my back pocket and
Ah.
kind of like sit on it. And I actually love that. I think it's a very
Cool.
attentive, aware thing to do, right? So that's
Yeah.
one interesting one. Another quick anecdote. This is a travel story, I guess, but you know, for a while there, it was okay to travel to Cuba to do a little bit of
Right.
business commercial research, which
Hmm.
in this grand scheme of like what you know, where you can go and what you can do was pretty wild, right? I mean, we're talking about a
Hmm.
walled off economy where nobody really knows how it worked. And like the only thing you could sell back and forth was like chickens and like a couple of other very like rice or like be like something just very, you know, commodity staple like that you could sell back and forth. So the idea that you go and like try to think about how to sell technology or, you know,
Right.
whatever else was really, really wild. So we actually wound up touring around, you know, Cuba just with kind of our local guy there for a while, a couple of years. This is when we were consultants too, right? We wouldn't do this now as a B2B SaaS company, but you know, we wound up at a dairy farm and like we're drinking the milk that had come
Right out of the
directly,
cow.
yeah, and like no pasteurization, whatever. And we're just
Oh, you're
drinking.
looking. I can just see you're looking over at your friend. You're like, "Yo, are you
I'm
gonna
sitting
drink this?"
here and
You're trying
uh,
to land. You're trying to land the client. The client's handing you the milk. You have to drink it.
yeah, we're like, oh, we can import this stuff to Colorado. We thought of a lot of crazy ideas in our first kind of year or two as business owners. But yeah, that whole experience, and there's some other stuff that I'll tell you about on that trip that was, you know, behind the curtain, so to speak, that I'm not going to put on record. But you know, only because it was research into.
I love the fact that you have the balls to travel to travel to these countries, drink stuff people are handing you because you're trying to land contracts.
Yeah,
You've taken some risks. I mean, all joking aside, you've
yeah,
taken a few risks.
yeah. I think it is. I think it is. You know, you walk that line between kind of bravery and stupidity first, until you realize your value proposition, and once you kind of hone in on that, you try to reduce that risk. But yeah, we've closed several deals by going to markets and shaking hands and speaking the language
Absolutely.
of those
Yes.
folks. I think that's
Yes.
old school, and I also think it's refreshing because
Yes.
people think that a LinkedIn message is going to do it, and
I know.
it's not at this point.
Uh,
And now it's even more difficult because we can't travel, right? So
can
that's part of
can we just take a pause right there for all of you out there listening to this episode? For those cheesy cut and paste sales LinkedIn messages you're sending me, I never read those. You are completely wasting your time.
Yeah, yeah. You should really be so targeted. You know, you can't.
Yes, yes,
Maybe
yes.
more targeted than that. So
I admire the fact that you've traveled and shaking hands and kissing babies to land contracts. I love that. I mean, that's, you know, seriously.
yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, look, I think going back to the first part of our conversation, like you spend 8 or 9 years in the music business and like you're not super, like now looking back at it realistically, not super prepared to go to that think tank or whatever it happens to be. And like there'd be a part of me, but there is something about being an entrepreneur now that is kind of very synchronous with that and kind of lines up.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's been interesting to just try to make that stuff happen. Plus I love to travel, right? I mean, you
Well,
know,
you just took the next thing away out of my mouth right there, which I was going to say, you know, while you're building this company, you're also having a very interesting and rewarding life to be able to meet people, experience cultures, travel. I mean, that's got to be that's a cool aspect of the job.
yeah, I always tell people like I have some you know, Colombian ministers numbers on my WhatsApp, right? So like I just will text them and say, hey, how are things going? And it's
Wow.
like a very that
Cool.
kind of just, I use that story just anecdotally, I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying that like
Yeah.
that if you just go and you're willing to treat people like any other business person in any other sector around the world, like you're going to have great results because
Exactly.
it's not the United States, you know, people need technology from elsewhere. They need
Right.
stuff. And so you go out and find it and try to help them and, you know, figure out where that gap is and you can do it. So I
Let
think
me,
it's, yeah.
let me ask you a couple of questions around being an entrepreneur. I know we only got 10 minutes left here, so I want to move you towards wrap up. So you've had an interesting ride so far. Love your story. Really cool story, by the
Thanks.
way. I
Thanks.
mean, you lived a quote cool life before you started the business, and now you're
Yeah.
still living a cool life.
Thanks.
Are you married, kids, or anything?
No.
Well,
no dependence yet.
now you just got even. Now your cool factor went up even more because now you can travel to these other countries. You're meeting chicks from all kinds of cultures. I mean, come on, you're living the life right now, Trevor. I mean, come on.
It could be a lot worse. We're not like talking about the point at like 3 or 4 in the morning where you're like head and hands crying because you're so uncertain about what you're, you know, doing with your life. But just kidding, that never happens.
I love it. I love the life you're living. Let me ask you some entrepreneurial advice. So for the listeners of this podcast, what would you tell them if they want to start something? They haven't started. They're getting ready to. They met some guy at a bar in Colombia that turned out to be their friend, and they're thinking about starting a business.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them today?
Sure. I mean, it does come down to need. I mean, you need to solve a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would list the problems you see around the world and rank them in terms of the ones you care about and the ones that are, you know, attackable or solvable through some sort of solution. And then as a parallel, talk to the customers that are going to, you know, wind up having to deal with that problem. Because if you're really talking about something they care about, that conversation should be frictionless, right? They should say, yeah, this sucks every day. I got to go to the office and I got to go to this website and this website. I'm watching the news and I'm getting a report. And my life it's hectic because I'm not getting what I need. And then try to intuit, you know, how you could start to make their life a little bit better, simpler, or save them a little money or whatever it is. And that's so just a relentless hyper focus on that customer problem to solve. And then also I would say just like patience in the long haul, you know, I mean, you're not, when your sales cycle is 3 to 4 months long and you're building B2B SaaS, like, you know, there's going to be some days where the best thing you can do is go play golf and like, don't worry about it because you're waiting on 9 or 10 contracts to come through and you're letting your team do their thing and you need to go get that mental space to kind of like figure out what's next. That's okay. You know, we're in an age where it's not like just because you're putting in 10, 12 hour days doesn't equal success. You need to just think really hard about that problem that you're trying to solve. And then I do think the pieces will kind of fall into place. Not that you shouldn't, you know, apply your maximal effort when it's time to solve that problem. But
now, really good advice, Trevor. Let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
Last question I want to ask you here. If you had to define your core purpose as a human being on planet Earth, what is your core purpose in a sentence?
I'll put it in a word, which would be connectivity, right? So we have stakeholders on the ground, communities, millions of humans, you know, billions of humans experiencing the reality that's produced by governments and companies, right? Let's think about that, okay? And then on the other side, you have those governments and companies. And I don't think that governments and companies are bad. I'm not one of those people that is against governments and companies inherently. I think that there's great folks in both of those sides of the coin that are trying to do good stuff. They're trying to live fulfilled, dignified lives. So if we can build tools to connect those two things, in other words, if I'm a community outside of mine in Cajamarca, Peru, and I don't feel like the water is clean because the mining company made it unclean, and then I'm at the mining company trying to make the water really clean, we're on the same side. We're on the same side. So I'm an optimist, and if we can create the connectivity that just creates that empathic space in between the community and or the consumer, if you want to put it like that, and the kind of power structures which happen to be enterprise and the governance in the world, that's a great place for us to be. So connectivity would be my word. I know that's probably like a buzzy technologist type thing to say, but yeah, if we can just create that empathic space and that connection in the middle, then that's a big broad goal. The tools got to speak to it, but I think we can do it.
That's great stuff, Trevor. Thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast. I really appreciate it.
Steve, you're the man. This is refreshing, man. This is way different than a lot of the interviews I've done. I appreciate the honest and frank questions, and I do hope we get to get together in Colorado and grab that coffee one day.
Oh, coffee? You mean beer?
Yeah.
If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to hit that little bell next to the subscribe button so you can be notified when we release a new episode. Our show features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get information on the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.